Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and so far in this series we've created a quest log user interface and actually made it so that we can create quests. So you can now click on these scriptable objects to define the name, description, and level for each quest. We've also added these quest slot prefabs, which allow us to take a quest, drag it in here, and have our UI auto update. That said, these quests don't do anything yet. So in this video, we're gonna actually create some objectives. So you can decide in this quest, you need to talk to someone, visit somewhere, or collect a certain number of items. Now, along the way here, we're gonna be using some stuff we've created in previous series, like our item scriptable objects. This is a scriptable object that defines our different item types. We also have actor scriptable objects. These define the different NPCs in our game. And we've also got location scriptable objects, which define different locations. None of these is particularly complicated, and I've taken a moment to leave them on screen so that if you haven't been following along, you've got access to exactly what's going on there. If you are a member or patron, you can also just access these through GitHub. All right, so what are we doing with all of this? Well, let's go back to our quest folder here. And the first thing we're gonna do is actually head inside of our quest because we wanna make some objectives here. All right, so what are we doing here? Well, let's begin by making a public list of all of our quest objectives. We'll just call this objectives. Now, of course, quest objectives does not actually exist yet, so let's start by making that. We'll come down below our entire script here, where we're gonna use the system namespace to make this a serializable class. That just means that we'll be able to see it in the inspector. Here we'll make a public class and we'll call it quest objective, and then we can define what that looks like. Let's begin with a public string called description. So this could be something like collect 3 mushrooms or visit the green hills. We're also going to need to define what we are trying to get for each of these. So we'll just make some targets here. So for example, it could be a public item scriptable object, in which case we'd call it target item. Could be an actor scriptable object, so target NPC, or a location, and we'll call that target location. We'll also just add a way to track this. We'll make a public integer for the required amount. We'll also make a public integer to track the current amount that we've got of whatever our target is. Now let's save that and pop into Unity for a moment before we make a slight improvement. So now when we click on our quest scriptable object, you'll notice there's this objective dropdown and we can add elements. For example, collect 3 mushrooms. Since mushrooms are an item, we would just add the mushroom scriptable object in here. And then we can put the amount that we need 3 and currently have 0. However, I don't like the way this looks as it leaves empty fields and could have potential for accidentally entering both at some point, and it's also just messy. So what we're gonna do is come up above here and make one box to rule them all, a private object called target. Now object could take literally anything inside of it. So how is this helping? We've now created 4 boxes instead of 3. Well, next we're gonna turn these other fields into properties, which means you will no longer see them in the inspector, and they're going to get whatever is inside the object box. So if there's an item SO in the box, when we talk to target item, we'll see it. If it's an actor SO, when we talk to target NPC, we'll see it, and similar for location. Now that might feel a little messy, but in practice what it just does is clean up our inspector. So admittedly, it now shows any item when we click on this, but if you know that you are searching for example mushrooms, we can now just fill the target with one thing and not have all that other mess cluttering it up. Similarly, we can add a location, say visit the Green Hills, just type in that location SO, fill the box with it, and now we've got a much cleaner looking inspector. For any location, we would just set our required amount to 1 as we only need to visit there once. And then I'll also just show an example of what this looks like for an NPC, like say, return to Blue Bob. Now that we've got our objectives fully written, we need a way to track them both in our UI and also to keep track of our progress in each of these objectives. So to do this, we're gonna create a new C# script that we'll call questlog UI. The UI because it will be responsible for updating our user interface. I'm just gonna click on the quest log as that's where we're gonna add this script. I'm gonna start by getting rid of our start and update method. And essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it so that anytime we click the button on any of those slots, it talks to the quest log UI. And so we need a public method for those buttons to call. Here we'll call that handle quest clicked. Now when we do click on one of those buttons, we need to make sure that we pass along which quest scriptable object that button represents. That way the UI knows what data it's looking at. For now, we're just gonna use a debug log, though later on we'll adapt this so that we can actually print it to our user interface. And here we're gonna use a slightly different type of debug log. Instead of using concatenation, we're just gonna get a little more precise since we're gonna be using a lot of different variables here. So what we can do is type $, quotation marks, and now we can type in whatever message we want, and just anytime we want to reference a variable, we put it in curly brackets. So here, we'll just say clicked quest : and then we want to display the quest scriptable object's quest name. That will give us a nice header for the quest, but then we also want to display each of its objectives. So for each variable, let's call them objective, in our scriptable objects objectives list, we just want to do another debug log. We'll do a $sign again, we'll say objective : and then now we're gonna, in curly brackets, put objective.description. Now that that method exists, we need to actually call it from somewhere, so let's head into our quest log slot, and we'll just make a quick public reference to that quest log UI. Now we'll just come down below and make a method for our button to talk to. So this will be a public void onSlotClicked method. And all we want to do is when we click on it, we want to tell our quest log UI that it should run its handle quest clicked method, and we'll pass along the current quest that's on this slot. Now to test this, we'll have to actually go into the game, and so I'm gonna just undo something I did in the first video to keep things clean, and that is I hid all my persistent objects by parenting them under this other one, but they won't run properly that way, so I'm just gonna set them on their own. And there we go. Now it's organized, and while it's not quite as clean, it'll run properly when we hit play. Now I'm also just gonna click on my quest slot, and you'll notice we have this quest log UI slot here, so let's just shift click all of those and drag our quest log in there so that they all get that reference. Now before we test this, we also just have to set up our buttons. So let's head into the quest slot prefab, open up our button, and here we'll just drag the quest log slot into there and tell it that we want to call the onSlotClicked method whenever we click on it. Now that we've done that, since we did it to the prefab, it will have applied to all of the other quest slots as well. All right, I can now get into the game, click on any of my slots, and we'll notice that we get a progress here printed. That's working quite nicely. However, I'm a little annoyed by the fact that I've got all these quests here in my log that don't actually have any scriptable object associated with them, so let's fix that. At the moment, our onValidate method is set up so that only if there's a quest will it set the quest data. However, let's just add an else statement so that if there is no current quest, it takes this game object and just sets its activeness to false. Additionally, whenever we set a quest, which happens when we fill it with a current quest, we're just going to make sure that that game object gets set active true. You'll notice that when you get back in the game, it's already updated things for us since we made that change and turned off all of the quest objects that don't actually have a scriptable object. And if I drag a new scriptable object in there, you can see that it adds the quest for us with the correct data. All right, that's working really nicely. We've now got the ability to print progress, but we're not tracking it yet. So that's where we're going to head in the next video. I hope to see you in that one. Until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.